Hello and welcome to the agenda on Politics Social. I am Graham Hughes and I'm joined, as always, by the delectable Phil Moorhouse.
Paul.
Oh, sorry,
Paul now, man.
I was putting your name together. Paul House, Paul House, Paul House, from a different bias. So thanks very much for coming on, Phil, and a giant badger who seems to be eyeballing a turtle.
It's World Turtle Day, you uncultured yob.
Is it?
This is the only good thing I have to say about Windows 11. It tells me every day what the day is.
What the day is.
It was like Sherlock Holmes Day yesterday or something earlier this week. I didn't care about that quite so much. I like Sherlock Holmes, but it doesn't need a day.
So
Turtles need a day.
I want to know, in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, how they grabbed hold of stuff. If there were tortoises, you could kind of
They were
understand.
Mutants. You seem to have ignored the mutant. But
why did the
aspect
flippers
of it.
turn into hands?
They're
Anyway.
mutants.
And they weren't teenage forever, were they? That series ran for about 30 years. So it should be middle-aged Mutant Ninja Turtles. Right.
I will tell you something about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, though. I mean, I'm not into music like you are, really. But you know how a lot of people will talk wistfully about the first album they ever bought?
Yes.
And it was always some like great album by someone that really got them to, this is an album so great I will.
Oh, Phil, you've dropped out. What happened? I moved my camera and you dropped out. Phil, come back. I didn't mean it. Phil, hello. Oh, what the hell is even happening? Hi, everyone in the chat. Waiting for Phil to come back. He's just
use it for my first album.
Oh, sorry, mate. Sorry, you dropped out. Sorry, you're going to talk about your first ever album.
Am I back again?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah. So my first ever album was the soundtrack to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film, which I didn't even watch.
My first single was TURTLE Power by Partners in Crime,
Right.
which was from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I bought it on a cassette from Woolies in Old Swan.
Yeah, well, mine was on cassette, yeah.
I'm proud of that.
I'm not proud of it. I'm not proud of it at all.
People go, well, what's your first single? They always make up something. Oh, yeah, it was Led Zeppelin. Yeah, sure it was, mate. I was only about like 8 or something, it's fine. Anyway, so everyone's bragging about like, oh my God, my first album was so cool. I'm so cool. Anyway, Phil, we got a lot to get through today, and we're actually going to be finishing early because, as you can see, I've got my flight case ready to put all this paraphernalia in and take it off to Brighton. It's going to be like a 6-hour journey down there. I should be arriving about 8 o'clock and then legging it to the pub, setting up, and we're going to be doing a live in-person Friday night social. It's going to be good.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
If we do one in Sheffield, would you come along?
No.
Oh, come on. Me and Femi and Ollie Bowler Hatman and EU Supergirl. Come on. Maybe boss? No?
What are you doing in Barnsley?
Barnsley?
Might get some gammons to come along.
Could you imagine us being in a pub in Barnsley going, oh yeah, the bloody Brexit is rubbish, isn't it? We hate Nigel Farage.
Great. Great for clicks.
Anyway, just want a big shout out to everyone in the chat, like Sandra and Dave and Witchy Goth and Alan Jackson, and particularly one angry pagan who's just dropped a £5 super chat in. Thank you very much. The greatest turtle is the great Atun, who holds the disc world and 4 giant elephants on his gigantic shell. It's very true. Thank you very much for that. If you'd like to join our friends in the chat there, all you need to do is press the subscribe button. We are nearly up to 42,000 subscribers. So tell your friends, tell your family, get them all to subscribe. Set up some more YouTube channels and then just subscribe to this channel. You can set up as many as you like, can't you? I think I've set up like 8. Anyway, Phil, right, we've got 3 main things to talk about. We've got the UK-EU trade summit. We have got the Starmer's big U-turn on winter fuel allowance. And we've got the Chagos Islands. What would you like to start with?
It's entirely up to you. I haven't brought my magic 8 ball.
Okay, let's talk first of all about the reset of the EU-UK relations. This is a really, really positive step, yes. I believe. Your mileage may vary. How are you feeling about it all?
It's a massive step because it is the first time where officially we are going in the opposite direction now. We're moving away from divergence and towards convergence.
Yes.
It has lots of benefits. I mean, first of all, I saw someone, I don't know who they really were though, but I've seen it crop up on my social media a lot. They were on the telly talking about, from the Brexiteers side of things, It's all, oh, betrayal, 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 absolute bollocks. And then they were saying, like, from Labour's point of view, as if it's this great utopia. It's like, no, Labour said it was a first step.
Yeah.
Where are you getting this from? They said it's a first step. But this first step, first of all, I mean, one of the big things, I did my video on this for noon today, and that isn't being reported at all, is it's going to allow us to have like food safety again. We haven't had food safety for the last few years because we don't have checks. So criminals are sending through, and we know this is happening because when they did that exercise in 2022, we know that there's loads of really unsafe food coming into the country.
Yeah.
And taking advantage of a cost of living crisis being targeted at poor people, right?
Yeah.
And that is because we cannot carry out proper checks. So now that we're not going to need those checks will now take place for us on the EU side. So EU inspectors obviously only inspect EU standards. So if they're inspecting something that's going to go to Britain, they go, well, that's not to do with us.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Well, now that'll happen.
Yeah.
So because we're going to have the same standards. So that will actually massively improve food safety.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is really great. I'm going to just show on the screen now. This is what Mike Galsworthy, who's the head of the European movement, this is what he posted on his Facebook this week. 5 of the 10 European movement's key asks confirmed in UK/EU summit talks: a youth opportunity scheme, a defence partnership, a UK-EU alignment on plant and animal health, what you were just talking about, and a veterinary SPS agreement, joined up approach to energy and net zero, rejoining Erasmus Plus, which I wasn't expecting, and that is a really, really positive move.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting. They seem to be downplaying that a lot. The energy one is also, again, there's several things about the deal that have wider implications. So we have quite a few energy intensive industries in the UK, including like farming. But there are energy intensive industries that have really suffered since energy prices went right up. Because if you think they went up, I mean, they've gone up about 50, 60% for domestic energy prices, but for business rates, it's gone up much more than that.
Yeah.
So restaurants and farms and some other industries as well really suffered, factories. If we can get access to the EU single market for energy again, then in conjunction with also moving more to green energy, then we should be able to get energy bills down, and that will help those industries. So it's not just that it will mean lower bills for people.
Yeah.
It will mean that we could be more competitive, because the UK has the highest cost of domestic energy of any of the G20 nations, literally the highest of anyone.
Yeah.
That's not competitive.
Yeah. So there was a piece in The Economist as well saying that this is, people saying, oh, this is a surrender deal is absolute nonsense. But the best part of this deal is actually a system for doing more deals. And instead of it being like in 5 years' time, we'll take a look at this again, it's now going to be every year from henceforth. Yes. We are going to have a sit down, a chat with the EU, and talk about the other stuff that is on the menu here from the European movement: rejoining Creative Europe, removing red tape for professionals, a mutual recognition agreement on conformity assessments, a better deal for musicians and touring artists, and rejoining the European Environment Agency.
You will not get the mutual. Labour wants the mutual conformity check.
Is that to do with recognition of qualifications?
That's like no. That's a separate thing. We are getting that. This is like being able to award the CE mark, having people in Britain who can authenticate something as CE mark worthy. The EU are not going to go for that. Their argument is Switzerland can do that because they pay into the single market budget and part of the single market. So the EU's position on that, and I think that is a firm red line, and it's a reasonable one, is look, this is if you want to be in the single market, that's fine. You can pay a fee and you can join the single market.
Yeah.
But until you're ready to do that, you're not going to be able to certify our standards.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, so do you see this as the first step on the way back to the EU, or do you think that this is
so? Well, it's whatever people want it to. What I would say to that question is, it doesn't matter what any government right now says or any future government says about it. If you were to rejoin the EU, this is in the right direction.
Yeah.
And whether we rejoin the EU depends on the next parliament and the parliament after. And what I will say is, every single year that passes, we get a load more young. In fact, in the next year, we're going to get 3 years worth of young people at once because we're lowering the voting age to 16 as well. So there'll be 3 years worth of people suddenly voting in the space of a year extra, young people who are overwhelmingly pro-EU.
Yeah.
And you've got more Brexit voters who were overwhelmingly elderly. So you've got a higher proportion of Brexit voters dying than Remain voters. So the odds, at the moment, there's still a lot of denial about it. Statistically, we know there are more Remain voters alive today than Leave voters. That is just statistically certain.
Yeah.
Particularly as, and the problem is it's not a nice topic to talk about people dying, and then you have to add in something else, which a lot of people don't talk about. We also know that a lot of Brexit Leave voters, generally speaking, more educated people tended to be Remain voters, not exclusively, but tended to be more Remain voters.
Just saying. And just
Leave,
saying.
And Leave voters tend to be less educated. And the other thing about education is more educated people live longer. So of the elderly people who are dying off, it's going to be proportionally more Leave voters than Remain voters, even amongst that age group, probably.
Yeah.
So statistically, you think in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, it's going to become so obvious that you won't be able to deny it. At the moment, it is the case there are more pro-EU than anti-EU. We know it from polling, but we also know it from just having a statistical approach to this. But it is also people are still denying it. That gulf will become so wide it'll be undeniable.
Yeah. Okay. So Z, thank you very much for the super chat. Tried to donate on PayPal. It will only let you do goods and services. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I thought you could do friends and family. Oh well, never mind. But thank you for the £2 super chat. That's very welcome. So next topic, because we're gonna have to rattle through the show today, because we're probably gonna stop at about 40 minutes past. And we're a little bit late getting started because when I tried to make the what's it called, the stream, it kept on just coming up with error messages, Phil. Anyway, so the other big thing that's happened this week is a big U-turn on the winter fuel allowance. Now, it's not exactly a U-turn, but it's what we've been calling for. They're not going to give the winter fuel allowance to everyone. They're going to raise the threshold in which you get it. And I think that's welcome. Do you think that's... I mean, do you think this is going to help Labour at the moment? Because the polling is in the doldrums, especially Keir Starmer's. Labour voters prefer Ed Davey, the leader of another party, over the leader of their own party.
Ed Davey hasn't had to say anything properly. In fact, he's chiming with what a lot of them want Keir Starmer to say, some of which he can't, but it doesn't matter. The bottom line is, as I've said this before, Labour came in to power with people had a certain expectation of them. Obviously, the manifesto forms that firm expectation, but even just there's certain ways people price in, even if they don't agree with it, with how a Labour government will behave. So when you suddenly decide not to behave like that, it's going to throw people off. And if it's also unpopular, like if it's something unexpected but popular, obviously you get away with it. But if it's something unexpected and unpopular, of course you're going to suffer. And it's utterly insane. The people around him in Downing Street, and Morgan McSweeney cops for the major flack for this, but then he is the senior advisor. They really don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's not that they're idiots. They have their uses. Morgan McSweeney but he's a campaigner. He's a proven effective campaigner. But what is a campaigner? It's someone who can organise people. It isn't necessarily someone who's good at analysing data. You don't have to be good at analysing data to be a good organiser of people.
Yeah.
So he's completely out of his depth in his role. He should be removed. He's like at the moment we're being told there's this row over like the 2 child cap that Keir Starmer wants it removed. Morgan McSween is the main block on it, and Adam Bienkov had a little cheeky thing saying, well, if only one of them was like in the senior position here, as if like Keir Starmer should just do it. And it's like, well, yeah, you can say that. At the same time, if you're constantly telling your chief of staff, nah, mate, you're talking shit, then there's no point in them being your chief of staff, right? Your chief of staff is supposed to be the one who is your enforcer, who organises the things. So if they fundamentally disagree with you on things, they're not going to do it very well. It's the same thing with now. We're talking about schisms between Number 10 and the Treasury. There shouldn't be schisms. What there should have been when the Treasury sent some of these policies to 10 Downing Street, 10 Downing Street at the time should have said, fucking stupid.
Yeah.
So, there shouldn't be a schism there. what there should be is a fundamental change of advisors. The advisors who've been steering them wrong, they've provably failed. Get rid of them. Get some people who know what they're doing in.
Yeah. Asperger's Europe, thank you very much for the £10 super chat. Albania opened its third cluster in its EU accession negotiations and have overtaken Serbia to second place candidate behind Montenegro. Serbia has also joined the single euro payments area. Yeah, everyone wants to join the EU because it's boss. Only an idiot would be a member and then want to leave when they had like a really, really good deal. But yeah,
and even Hungary doesn't want to leave, and it hates the EU.
Yeah,
it hates the EU more than people in this country do.
Clupid Blaroscope is saying rumours is that Street Singer is going to ban HRT for trans people under 18. Yes, I've heard this as well. And if he does, this is an absolute fucking disgrace. This is on the back of one person who regretted having hormone replacement therapy as a teenager. One person.
Yeah.
And if you look at the level of regret of people who have knee surgery, it's like 20%. In fact, having gender realignment surgery, which you're not allowed to have until you're over 18 anyway in this country, the amount of regret in that is substantially lower. You're looking at about 1%. I mean, more people regret getting stupid tattoos.
Yeah. Again, but the whole thing right from the beginning, Streeting's attitude has been incredibly unscientific.
It's been very transphobic. Incredibly transphobic, especially for a gay man.
I have no idea whether it's transphobic or strategic, but the approach is definitely unscientific. That is, I am certain of that.
I think he just likes to make people's lives.
I really don't know, because I would say so if it was just his department doing this, but we know it's a general strategy within Labour, so there's clearly a strategic direction here. And it doesn't matter whether he's a transphobe or not, the outcome's the same. But I'm not trying to stick up for him, but I am just going to say that this is clearly a central Labour strategy, and Streeting is very, very loyal to Starmer. So it would make no difference whether Streeting absolutely hates himself and every day he wakes up, he would still do it.
Well, Grimfang in the chat is saying Labour seem much less sure of their anti-trans position this week, delaying women's conference over the issue and not applying changes in Parliament yet. They don't know what they're doing. They honestly don't know what they're doing. And like there seems to be a raft of things that Labour did. Winter fuel allowance, PIP, and the anti-trans stuff that just landed them in an absolute, in the poldrums. Can I say poldrums? Is that a real word? I've just made that up. But I am so fucking angry with Labour because there was no overall control here in Durham, but now it is overwhelmingly refuck, and we're stuck with these bastards for the next 4 years. The first thing they did was take the pride flag and the Ukrainian flags down from any council buildings in the county. They're going to be an absolute fucking monster running this council. And they're completely inept, completely out of their depth, and they're evil. They're evil people who just want to feather their own nests and make life more difficult for people who aren't them, I guess. I blame Labour for it. This was a protest vote against Labour, and it's great that they're not being invited to the Durham Miners' Gala, quite rightly, and they're whinging about it. They're going, "Why are we invited? Labour's invited." I'm like, set up by Labour. It's a Labour thing. Going back decades, going back over a century. The Labour leader usually comes to Durham for the Durham Miners' Gala and does a speech from the hotel just by Elbert Bridge. I mean, this is a tradition, and it's like refuck are trying to muscle in on it. Anyway, so I'm pissed off at Labour for doing all this shit stuff all at once just before the local elections, and the
thing is as well, it's not even like it was just a mistake. Anyone with any political acuity would have known the winter fuel payment. I mean, I said at the time, as soon as it was announced, and at the time, for all I knew, they'd done their homework on it. They'd done their polling and found out they could get away with it. And I still said, this sounds fucking bold to me, because taking something off pensioners, it was given in the first place. The people who, it was introduced in the first place in 1997 by Gordon Brown, as soon as Labour came to power. Why? Because pensioners are fucking important voters, and they tend to vote Tory. It was given as a bribe, and The Conservatives, when they came to power, they didn't increase it. They didn't increase it with inflation. Oh, no. They didn't want to, because they didn't really believe it either. Remember, Kemi Badenoch said it should be means tested, but they didn't dare get rid of it.
Yeah.
Because of the same reason. So what sort of munchkin would go, I know, let's take money off old people without making bloody sure, without having tested the waters? Yep. They just announced it straight away. It wasn't even in the budget. It was before then. So it's not even like they were going to prepare the groundwork and get rid of it a year later or something. No, it had to be straight away, immediately, that following winter. So they announced it in the summer. Mental. I could not believe it.
Not evidence-based, I would say.
No, it was not evidence-based. And the proof of that is the fact that it's killed them in the polls. Like, if it were, it would be different if they'd have done the homework and found out, actually, with a certain line of communication, you can get away with this. But because they now accept that it has absolutely stuffed them in the polls, that one policy above all others, by the way, even though it's arguably not very serious at all, but that one policy was a political hot potato of such proportions that they're now having to try and U-turn on it. And even then, they're being tentative.
Yes, but they're being lambasted in the press anyway. This is why I don't understand when people talk about, oh no, we can't do that because we'll upset the press. If you're Labour, if you're left-wing, you're going to upset the press just by existing. Well, and even when you do a good thing, they're going to say, this is a dreadful thing they've done. The EU-UK deal is a really good deal. Yeah. Even for the fisher folk who are pissed off at the continuation of the Boris Johnson really good deal that Boris Johnson sold as a really good deal. It's an extension of that, except they can now sell their catch to the EU, which they couldn't do before.
Well, they did, but they can do it easy.
Shellfish was out of
some certain things.
Certain things you couldn't sell them at all. Now you can.
Bivalve mollusks. Yeah,
bivalve mollusks. So when somebody think of the bivalve mollusks, but look, the Tories are in the doldrums that they haven't got a leg to stand on. I think the thing that Labour hadn't considered, because they looked at this and they went, oh yeah, Tories are done for. They've only got 121 MPs. Everyone hates them. And they've got Kemi Badenoch as leader. They haven't banked on Farage and Reform and how successul they are being and how popular they're being. And they should have done.
I was told something earlier this week, from someone who's in the know.
Ooh, okay.
Did I tell you this? So the thinking behind the winter fuel allowance, do you know what it was? It's two of the stupidest things you've ever heard.
There was thinking behind it.
There was thinking, and do you know what it was? And I was double face palming when I was told this. Right, this is someone in the know, right? The first thinking was that people were pricing in that things would get worse before they got better, right? So they'd accept something like this because they thought things would get worse before they get better. Now, I know that was probably unlikely. Again, I always have to accept the fact that Labour have much more detailed polling than we get the published stuff. Yeah. But I saw polling from More in Common that showed that even Labour voters were not going to give Labour very much time to start showing improvements within a year. Yeah. So when I was told this, I thought, well, I'd seen polling straight after the election that said even Labour voters expected rapid progress. So I'm straight away thinking, right, so you've just thought that, you've just sat around, like we all do. We've all done this, haven't we? You all sit around with other like-minded people and we all put the world to rights. And we imagine how people think without actually having any evidence for it. We just reason it out. That's what they've done. But then the second reason, I nearly pissed myself laughing. Their second reasoning, right, was because the Conservatives were clearly going that way themselves, that they and the Tory media wouldn't make a fuss. Honestly, they actually thought that.
That shows a level of political naivety that should actually be illegal.
Yeah. It should not be anywhere near Downing Street. Anyone who can think like that should not be anywhere near Downing Street.
That's terrifying on so many levels. So Janeway has dropped. Sorry, Janeway. I keep calling you Janeway. I don't know why I keep saying that. I keep putting an extraneous A in there. I don't need to. Janeway, thank you for the super chat. The groundswell is forming against Labour regarding their trans stance. Max broadcast this morning showing Greens and Lib Dems benefiting. Yeah, People are going to the Libs and
No.
the Lib Dems.
I have to say,
in large numbers, Phil. No, they are.
But it's not because of that, though. Let's not kid ourselves.
Is that not one part of it?
Not really, no. The trans issue is, it's something. The thing is, because it's not an issue in the polls, that is why Labour are wrong to take their position. Because it would make no difference at all if they took the right position. It would have a lot of it would have a big flap in the press.
I think that
polling that suggests
the people who hate trans people are in the vanishing minority, but the people who have friends or family members, and I know it's a smaller minority than having friends who are gay or something like that, but I mean, it's still having an effect on people. And there are people who are saying, "I'm never voting Labour again because of this." This goes beyond the pale.
This is echo chamber stuff. The polling says the opposite, but it is not the case that polling says that people want Labour to adopt these anti-trans positions either. It's not going to affect their vote. The reason why so many people are going to the Lib Dems and Greens is purely because, and we know this from polling, it's because of those cuts and the fact they don't want to vote Reform UK, and of course they don't.
Do you not think it might be multiple reasons though?
It's not. No, I base everything on polling, not people in my echo chamber. So there's absolutely zero evidence in polling.
It's not like a cumulative effect of them going, well, that was because I'm not.
But obviously, I'm not saying there's no one.
I don't get it. I'm never going to get it. You know,
I'm not saying there's no one in the country who's done that. It is not It's not shifting the dial on polling at all. We would see that.
So you wouldn't see. How would you see that in a poll if people go, "Oh, we're not happy with Labour. Why aren't you happy?" Number one, winter fuel allowance. Number two, PIP. They might not mention the trans thing, but that's definitely something that a lot of people go, "That's the last straw."
If people mention it in numbers, it comes up. Particularly these days. I mean, YouGov, for example, use AI a lot in their polling now. So they don't. It's not even a case of having to produce a list. Yeah, but it's not a case like it used to be the case. You'd have a list, things that you might be unhappy with. They would have to try and come up with a list with what they think are the big issues. You pick them. Nowadays, you don't. You can just say, and the AI will distill it all out. People want it to be a big issue because people want Labour to reverse their transposition. But at the moment, at least, and it could snowball later on if it ends up being a big showdown with the European Court of Human Rights on some issue. It could become a big issue later on, which was one of my arguments. They could have dealt with it. They could have nipped it in the bud immediately. They could have absolutely nipped it in the bud. Yes, the papers would have frothed, but in 3 or 4 years' time, people would care.
The people who, the transphobes, don't really vote on that, and they wouldn't be voting for Labour anyway. So why placate them and throw trans people under the bus, like massively? People are going to die. People are going to die, Phil, because of the lack of treatment that the treatment that's being denied.
But it's important to understand why they're doing it. It's important to understand. If you want to counter it, you must understand why they're doing it. They're not doing it to placate any transphobes. That's not the strategic reasoning. The reasoning is purely this fear of the press. They know the press will go mental on it. And unfortunately, Labour don't seem to understand that it's on the same level as like VAT on public school fees. The press are frothing about that. They're still doing it now. If I go onto the Daily Telegraph, I will not have to go very far back before there's another story on moaning about VAT on private school fees.
They'll moan about everything.
That's not
like that. I mean, the fact
Labour
that you're saying Labour are
They're-
scared of the press. I mean, why?
Yeah, but then
Should come out
because they're
blazing.
not. I'll tell you why. Because they're not distinguishing. Because they're not afraid of the press as such. They're afraid of what the readers of the press will think. But they're not distinguishing between something that a person might agree with or a position they might agree or disagree with and one that affects their vote. And trans issues do not affect their vote. They don't affect their vote at all.
Well, the fact the votes of a lot of the people that I have dealings with, and I know you say it's an echo chamber, but they're the people producing content online that could be pro-Labour, but it isn't anymore. So Labour are losing that as well. Even though the shit at social media to start with, and then now they're not even getting support from people like me who would otherwise go, we should be supporting Labour. I'm like, fuck off now.
What, you're going to tell them to let the Conservatives reform back at the next election?
No. I'm going to tell people to vote tactically. But you know what? The way things are going, the tactical vote's going to be the Lib Dems or the Greens.
Well, no, only in certain areas. There's certain areas it's not going to. But the point is,
I've got 2 Greens. I don't have a refuck here.
Yeah. But the point is that they also don't appreciate the impact of social media either. Otherwise, they'd be using it.
No, they don't.
So
They don't care about that.
they also won't appreciate that. They also won't appreciate that they're losing support amongst those who are using social media.
This comes across to me as a huge, huge mistake. And
is a
people
mistake, yeah.
are incredibly passionate about this subject in a way that you would be if black people were told they weren't allowed to use the fucking bathroom.
No, it's
because
not.
they
It's not on
might
that
attack
level
you.
at all. It's not on that level.
Why is it not on that
Nowhere
level?
near on that level because it's not showing up anywhere in the polls.
No, I'm saying individually, as people's revulsion against what's going on is on that level.
But
this isn't just a case of I don't agree with this one Labour policy. This is people going, I don't agree with Labour. Full stop. Never voting for them again. Which is really unhelpful.
But that has come about because of the cuts.
Because of
the cuts.
The cuts.
Winter fuel allowance, PIP.
Yeah, but that doesn't affect me.
That's what's caused it. No, but it has affected the polls.
I don't get winter fuel allowance and I don't get PIP.
Yeah, but it has affected the polls.
Yeah. But don't you think that I'm going around the circles here, but from where I'm standing or sitting right now, people get upset about multiple things with their party. And there's a point when, the straw that broke the camel's back. And I think for a lot of Labour activists and Labour people online, and I know that, you can say it's a bubble, but we do have collectively a very large audience. There's a lot of people who are really...
The thing that did that is the cuts. It's the cuts that do that to people.
I've not heard of anyone saying they have started self-harming or they're going to attempt suicide because of those cuts.
No. Well, actually, I have, but unfortunately, I've had quite a few people. But the PIP cuts in particular has caused a lot of...
I was talking about the winter fuel allowance. Sorry.
The winter fuel allowance is not an issue. I mean, that's a political issue. It's purely political. Every single pensioner who got through the last winter had more money than they did the winter before in real terms. So the situation was no worse in this last winter. The winter fuel allowance is purely political. Yes, it should have been... I mean, people shouldn't need it at all. But given that they do, it should have been... The threshold should have been higher anyway, granted. But that is not... That is a political issue. That was a political cock-up. The principle of means testing it is not a problem for me at all. The principle of removing PIP is a problem because these are people who have... Ironically, if they'd means tested that, it wouldn't be so bad.
Yeah.
Because maybe, if you're on £100,000 a year, okay, you have still... If you're disabled, you've still got those extra costs. It's not necessarily fair, but you probably can cope. Whereas we're talking about taking it off people who that actually means they won't be able to cope.
Yeah, and they won't be able to work.
Yes.
Because a lot of people who get PIP are in work. It's a stupid policy. But we've got a few super chats come in. We got one angry pagan saying socially conservative policies are not helping, in all caps. Yes. Thank you very much for the super chat. Chris C as well. Thanks for the super chat. A better policy would be to reform the press. Then couldn't agree more. And then another one from Chris C. What people don't realise is it won't stop with trans issues. It's a slippery slope towards the eroding of all rights of ordinary people. And although it might not be showing up in the polls right now, in the same way that nobody really cared about the EU back in 2011, this will snowball one way or another. And I just feel like this is a stupid thing for Labour to do. And I think it's a bit flippant just to say, oh, well, no one really cares when a lot of the people watching this right now, Phil, really, really care.
It's a tiny number.
The people watching this, I think it's everyone who's watching this right now.
No, of people who vote, the people who swing votes. Because the issue for Labour is they've got themselves into this position where they've got to appeal to socially conservative. There's a lot of people, like if you think about lots of like left-wing commentators, they tend to be socially liberal, almost exclusively socially liberal, but we are an aberration. A lot of voters are socially conservative on the left. The problem Labour have is because they're not data-driven, they're not realising what those voters want from them is the left-wing stuff. They don't need the socially conservative stuff. In the past, Labour have, if I read something, someone posted in the WhatsApp group, someone saying, who do Labour represent now? Do they represent the professional left-wing liberals, or do they represent the working class left-wing socially conservative? Well, they always represented both in the past because the choice was between Labour and the Conservatives, And the Conservatives would appeal to their socially conservative values, of course, but screw them in their pockets, and people will always prioritise their pockets. And it's the same today. People will still prioritise their pockets. If you give them the decent housing, the decent NHS, good jobs, decent pay, good rights at work, which is what Labour are doing, those people will be satisfied with that. They're not going to throw it away for the sake of even immigration policy, quite frankly, but certainly not on the back of a policy that targets people they don't even know.
Yeah, but
So
Janeway is saying in the
getting it
chat,
wrong.
1% of UK are trans. Their parents, friends, family and allies will vote on this issue. They are shifting away from Labour. I work with 100 groups, all abandoning Labour, and Labour is now banned from prides across the country. A few years ago,
so are the Lib Dems and
Keir
Greens.
Starmer. A few years ago, Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner were at the front of Pride, and they, in London,
In Camden,
and they were in Camden, and they were walking along with them, and this was a celebration, and saying, "Yeah, you're all involved." It's not just trans people, because they will bring on all of their friends who are in the LGBT community, which is fucking huge.
It should
and
be.
they're active as well.
But I would just point out there are LGBT groups who are also attacking trans people.
Yeah, well, LGB
There are.
Alliance, which doesn't really count because
Yeah.
it's a Tufton Street mysteriously funded
either
think
way.
tank. But they're quite few and far between. But what I'm saying is, like, this is it's a snowballing of an issue, and it's not going to go away, Phil.
But
It's not going to go away. They can make the winter fuel allowance thing go away, put the threshold up, brilliant. They can turn their back on PIP, but if they continue down this road of rampant transphobia, there's nothing but pole desolation at the end of that.
Now, I mean, we agree to disagree on this, but what I'll say is absolutely zero evidence. It's nice to think it, because, and this is why you want to think it, because if it does kill them in the polls, Labour have shown that they will have to reflect that. And if they don't, then they will lose and they'll get rid of Starmer, and the next person will reflect it. And that's what you think is the way to argue it, but that is not correct.
Well, I see it the way that I saw it with Brexit, with the last lot going along with Brexit, when obviously there were people who were very, very passionate about the fact that we didn't want to leave the EU. It was the Tories' flagship policy, and we were getting no support, or very little support from Labour fighting against it. And they turned their back on 1 million potential activists, and this is what they're doing now with the gay community,
but
the queer community.
It's very different here. First of all, that was economics. People were told it would be good for their pockets, so they voted it. And now that they've seen it hasn't been good for their pockets, they're not supporting it. This has no economic bearing at all. Some social issues have an economic bearing, like immigration has an economic slant.
I'm not talking about that, Phil. I'm not talking about the polls. I'm talking about activists.
I know you're talking about it, but those same activists would never, under any circumstances, all back Labour. Some will always back the Lib Dems, because if you think about what different parties stand for, Labour parties...
I'm talking about people who will back Labour, and one activist is worth 100 voters. I mean, in a local election, that is the difference between winning or losing.
You talked about a million. You're not going to tell me there are millions and millions and millions of LGBT activists. You said 1 million.
No. I was talking about Brexit. Labour missed an opportunity to get all those activists on side. So they said, we don't want to see a single... We don't want to see... I mean, imagine they have a march against the Tories and they say, we don't want to see a single EU flag. Now they're doing that with trans people. We don't want to see a single trans flag at our march.
Okay,
and I'm
so
like...
answer me this then. Answer me this. Why haven't all these activists made it a polling issue?
Well, I mean, clearly they have, because
Well, they haven't.
Labour are desperately dying in the polls.
No, but not because of this. You're trying to do the Owen Jones thing of, Labour are failing because of this thing I don't like.
No, this is, like I say, it's a culmination. But I don't think it can be so easily dismissed.
It can be, because it's not showing up anywhere. It's not showing up anywhere. If it were, it's not even a discussion amongst polling analysts. Like, data analysts aren't even discussing it as a factor.
So they're not even asking people about it then?
Yes, but it's not a fact. It's not showing up anywhere.
Because there's so few people care about it.
Yeah.
So
and that is why Labour, that is actually the argument why Labour shouldn't be taking this position. Because I'll tell you what they will care about if there's a big, because we know Keir Starmer, like one of his actual personal red lines is he does not want the government to break international law. So if he puts himself on a collision with the European Court of Human Rights, that is going to create a massive stink.
Yes.
That will create a huge problem.
Yeah. And
that's the argument that should be. Don't try and argue. Like one of the biggest problems we have in progressive politics, I think, one of the massive issues is you've got too many people who are part of a clique who think they're part of the mainstream. That was the problem with Corbynism. Corbynism went wrong, not because, anything was particularly wrong with Corbyn's policies as such, or most of them. It was because a small number of people believed that they were in alignment with the majority, and the majority told them to fuck off, right? Instead of which, if they'd have been more self-aware, they would have recognised that actually we're part of a majority. We need these guys in order to win power. So we will work on persuading them in the first instance, and if not, compromising. And you steer yourself wrong if you tell yourself things that aren't true. If you think
that's fair enough,
a particular
Phil.
viewpoint
that's fair enough. But I see the abandonment of activists, people who will actually go out and knock on doors and be, getting people to vote for Labour, as a reason why they should, on a situation like this where you say it has no effect on the polls. I think to abandon activists like that is stupid and short-sighted. But then, as you mentioned, what's going to happen is this is going to go all the way to the European Court of Human Rights, and then the gobshites in Refuck and the Tories are going to say, "Ha look, this is a foreign court overruling a British court," and they're going to use it as a Trojan horse to ride all the way into number 10.
Exactly. That is why it is a stupid move. It's not a stupid move because it's going to cost them the election.
Well, it will though, won't it?
No.
Hang on, I just said they will ride it as a Trojan horse into number 10.
Oh no!
That's a knock-on effect.
They won't win the election on the back of that. What they will do is they will be able to win election despite it, and then do it. Because at some point, Labour are going to lose an election. Doesn't matter when it is; it's irrelevant. They're going to lose an election, and as long as it doesn't matter whether the Reform government that forms, if we don't change the system, wins on the back of a promise to leave the European Court of Human Rights or not, it's totally irrelevant. All they have to be able to do is stick it in their manifesto, and people not be alarmed enough about it because they're unsure, and they'll do it. And that'll be, and it's like, Tony Blair. I mean, this is like the curse of the Labour Party at the moment. Tony Blair, who was like the most pro-EU Prime Minister we've ever had, the most explicitly pro-EU Prime Minister we've ever had, and yet, because he failed to bring in electoral reform, he was not complicit, but he was effectively responsible for allowing the conditions to allow for us to leave the EU. And Starmer, who's Mr. Lawman, and who is incredibly anal about following rules, he seems less concerned these days, or this didn't used to be the case. He seems less concerned whether those rules are nice or not. But he is an absolute stickler for laws. Could actually end up weakening the rule of law in Britain because of this.
Yes,
that is possible.
Yes, that's the progression that I see. And obviously someone sat around the table and said, hey, how do we get Britain to now, after leaving the EU, how do we get them to leave the European Court of Human Rights?
Yeah.
And be like Russia and Belarus, the only other countries in Europe that aren't a member of that
Belarus
court.
is basically Russia now anyway. Russia's annexed it.
Well, exactly. The little puppet leader, Lukashenko. Okay, Phil, we're going to have to leave it at that because I need to get my arse to Brighton. I need to pack up all this stuff. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. A healthy debate there with Phil Moorhouse of a different bias. If you want to join his channel, it's a very cool one to join. On the way out, if you give us a like, that would be awesome. And hopefully, all being well, I'll see you at 9:30 tonight in Brighton, live, in real life, for the Friday Night Social. Hope to see you then. Bye-bye.